The deadline to pick up players' fifth-year options is end of day today. Miami went ahead and signed wide receiver Jalen Waddle and linebacker Jalen Phillips through the 2025 season. Great news for Miami, and maybe even better news for Tua Tagovailoa. Tua also needs a new deal, right? He led the NFL in passing yards last season, becoming the first Dolphins quarterback to do that since Dan Marino back in 1992. However, it wasn't all good for Tua and the Dolphins as they struggled against quality competition. Miami went 1-6 against teams that finished with a winning record. They were held to 16 points per game, and Tua nearly had the same amount of interceptions as touchdown passes in those games. So Tua performed well, but not necessarily in the moments when it mattered most. Mike, even though Tua did struggle against the top teams, he was able to stay healthy last year, which was definitely key, especially considering what had happened before. How do you see the Dolphins approaching his contract situation?
Yeah, Laura, this is really interesting. I think on an average per year, it's really not that hard, $52, $53 million per year. But here's where it's interesting. From a team standpoint, look, Tua was hurt in college. He was hurt in the NFL. Like, those are the facts. On the other side of it, if I'm Tua, I'm like, well, look, 66 different quarterbacks started a game last year, and we were 31st in pass block win rate, but I started all 17 games. So I proved that I can be healthy, and I should go to the top of the market, not just in average per year, but in guaranteed money. And I think that's a really hard sort of threading the needle here because both sides have good points. And I just think on the guaranteed money, that's going to be really hard to solve because I understand the perspective that each side has.
Yeah, this whole contract with Tua is a dicey situation because when you're talking about paying Tua the type of money at the top end of the market, I mean, listen, we see what's going on in Buffalo. Look at what's happening with Buffalo right now, where they basically have to strip down their whole defense because obviously you're paying Josh Allen, who's, by the way, one of the top three quarterbacks that we have in our league right now. So if you're going to pay Tua that type of money, good luck. He's going to have to, those type of quarterbacks need to be able to elevate your team. And we saw the record, against winning teams last year when Tua was playing those good teams. So I'm just not sure about that type of contract.
Yeah, it is interesting because the numbers say one thing. There's also context there, his relationship with Mike McDaniel, how much they love him in Miami. Miami's roster, either way, Mina, has gone through a lot of changes around Tua this offseason. What's been your biggest takeaway when you look at what they've done?
Yeah, I like a lot of the moves they made kind of around the margins, Laura. I mean, there were some players who left who got enormous contracts elsewhere. Christian Wilkins, Robert Hunt, the guard, they couldn't afford them. But you brought in players that I think are talented and sort of can start for them and fill holes. Jordan Brooks, linebacker from Seattle. Kendall Fuller, the cornerback. Jordan Poyer at safety. These are all good football players. I like what they did in the draft. I like the players they drafted. Chop Robinson is one of the more exciting edge rusher prospects in the draft this year. However, and I feel like a broken record on this, it's really been 3 years now that I voiced this concern. I do not feel like they have done enough to address the offensive line. Mike talked about them ranking near the bottom of the NFL in pass block win rate. A lot of the issues in protection that they've had, some of it's because of injuries. It's been mitigated to a large part because of Tua's quick release in the scheme, but it is a problem that flares up every year. And every year I continue to be slightly frustrated that this team isn't addressing it. And maybe not in terms of, signing high-priced starters that they can afford, but at least taking lots of shots to add to the depth. They did draft an offensive tackle in the second round, but I feel like they could have done more.
Yeah, what's interesting from a team building standpoint, Bradley Chubb is coming off a big injury. So is Jalen Phillips. So when you take Chop Robinson in the first round, your vision has to be, hey, especially early, we need 20, 25 meaningful snaps, maybe fourth quarter snaps with the lead to close out games. Because while you're hope and expect Phillips and Chubb to be ready, Laura, you just don't know. So I thought that pick said a lot. I like Chop Robinson's ability, but I think they're going to count on him, especially early in the season, because you don't know if those guys are going to be ready to go and take a full load.
Talking about the Ravens as OBJ's former team, it's been a busy offseason for them. The biggest move came when they signed Pro Bowl running back Derrick Henry, adding Henry to what was already one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL with Lamar Jackson at the helm. However, the Ravens lost 3 starting offensive linemen this offseason. It's pretty important. They'll rely on second-round pick Roger Rosengarten to fill one of those spots. Mina, when you think about and look at this offense after the changes, is it a better group for Lamar than last year's team? Where are you at on that?
I don't know if it's a better group particularly because they lost like half of the offensive line. Even if Rosengarten can come in and start, it's still an area of concern of mine. Really like the Derrick Henry signing. Tez Walker, who they got later in the draft, I think has upside for them. And I'm still a believer in Rashad Bateman, who they brought back at a pretty reasonable contract. But for me, Laura, the reason why I'm actually optimistic about the offense, there's two reasons. One, we forget they lost Mark Andrews for a pretty significant portion of the end of the year last year. So for him to come back, I think is going to be extremely significant. Isaiah Likely really developed as a secondary tight end, so they could do a lot of multiple tight end sets. And then the other thing is this. They completely revolutionized the offense last year. It's totally different from Greg Roman under their new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. This is year 2. Year 1, you really saw a bit of an adjustment period on both sides, especially in the beginning of the season. So I think if they can continue building on what we saw throughout much of last year in the passing attack in particular, this offense can actually be better despite losing some of the talent on that line.
And assuming that Mina's right about their passing attack getting better, no team had the fourth quarter lead more last year than the Baltimore Ravens, and that can only get better this year. And Derrick Henry, to me, this is the old pass to score and run to win. He'll be able to close out games in the fourth quarter with those leads. And of all the moves that Mina just went over, I think Derrick Henry by far is the most consequential. One, he should be able to close games out. And secondly, maybe more importantly, keep Lamar Jackson healthy. Take some of those reps off of Lamar, which will keep him hopefully healthy for the playoffs. So I think Derrick Henry really could be a force multiplier, both keeping the ball away and winning games, and again, making sure that Lamar Jackson is as healthy as possible coming down the stretch.
Yeah, listen, for me, I'll go to the other side of the ball. I do have concerns about the Baltimore Ravens defense. We saw some of the players that they lost, obviously Jadeveon Clowney, Patrick Queen, but for me, Mike Macdonald was one of the best defensive coordinators that the league had last year, and the type of exotic blitzes and schemes that he did with the Baltimore Ravens. They were the best unit in the National Football League last year. Now he moves on as a head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. So he's not going to be a guy that's going to be easily replaceable. And I think that, he could leave a mark with the Baltimore Ravens defensively this year.
Yeah, you think about when the Eagles lost their coordinators and the drop-off that happened there. I mean, you hope for the Ravens' sake they don't see that type of drop-off, but it is significant. You mentioned how good they were, D-Wood. Under McDonald, the Ravens' defense led the NFL in points per game, sacks, and takeaways last season. All right, check this out as well. We've got something else. Oh, they're signing their draft picks. Look at this. The Ravens off and running, getting them all in-house there. We were just talking about him. I love the pickup of Nate Wiggins. That's an incredible one out of Clemson. And then Roger Rosengarten, who Mina just mentioned. You got TJ Tampa, the DB, and then they got a couple DBs there later on in the draft. Do you think the Chargers front office have put a better team around Herbert with their moves this offseason?
Yeah, listen, I think this team is markedly better, and for a couple reasons. Number one, I think that the players that they brought in that's going to surround Justin Herbert. But more importantly, Laura, it's the mentality that Jim Harbaugh is bringing to the Los Angeles Chargers. He is all about trench warfare. He is all about just blunt force trauma, with that group on both sides of the ball. And you heard the GM of the Chargers right there talking about you also can help your quarterback by playing good defense and running the football and those type of things. So I absolutely love what the Chargers have done so far. Yes, they do. They need to make some moves at wide receiver. But to me, it's about the mentality that they're bringing to Los Angeles. That's what's going to make the biggest mark out there.
You know what's really remarkable, to D. Wood's point, when Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh were at the 49ers over that 4-year span, they ran the ball the third most of anybody in the NFL. And juxtaposed against that, since Justin Herbert has been in the NFL, they've run the ball the third fewest. So you know who the happiest is that Jim Harbaugh is there? Is Justin Herbert's parents. He is going to be healthy for the first time. And that move, that first pick they made, I'm telling you, that was a statement pick, to D. Wood's point. And I think what's so fascinating about the Chargers is not what they look like in September and October to me, guys, but what they look like in December, because for the first time, Justin Herbert's going to be healthy coming down the stretch, and that makes this Charger team so intriguing to me.
Yeah, I think we all expect the run game to look a lot better. A run game that was really one of the worst in the NFL last season for a number of reasons. The changes that they've made on the offensive line, bringing in those Raven backs, bringing in the former Raven offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, who, as frustrated as people got with him at the end in Baltimore, that man knows how to call a rushing attack in the NFL. All of that's fantastic, but I also think it can't be downplayed how much potential improvements in pass protection will help the passing attack as well. It's kind of being left out of this discussion as we assume Harbaugh is going to just run the ball, but a big part of the reason why Justin Herbert has not pushed the ball downfield, and there's multiple reasons for that. Some of it's scheme, some of it's lack of weapons, healthy weapons. A big reason why was he did not have enough time to push the ball downfield. Hopefully, with what could be one of the better tackle duos in the NFL, if Joe Walt is all we believe he'll be opposite Rashawn Slater, he will have that time. This isn't incomplete. There's still work to be done in that pass catching group. I love the addition of Ladd McConkey, but they still need a big ball winner. We'll see if Quentin Johnson can take a leap forward. But as the first step towards fixing an offense that was broken in multiple ways, I like what they did.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mina, because I do think some of the departures could maybe hold a little bit more weight here. Who do you think they missed the most of who's left, especially just specifically in the wide receiver room?
Well, it's Mike Williams, but when Mike Williams was healthy, which is an unfortunate but necessary caveat. When he was healthy, he was exactly what they needed. That big-bodied X receiver who could win at all three levels, who could separate downfield, who was such a good contested catch guy, but he wasn't always available to them. I actually think Ladd McConkey can replicate some of Keenan Allen's production, but they need either Quentin Johnston to take that step, he was a first-round draft pick, or they need to find someone else to be that player in the offense.
Yeah, a reminder that Mike Williams is now with the Jets. We'll